My
Welcome.
wonderful
Welcome.
panel. You've just heard them introduced, but just again, we have Corey, we have Linda, and we have Shelby. Welcome to you all. And congratulations to us, because we have an all-female panel, right? Yay.
And not by design, it just happens.
Not by design, absolutely. We're normalizing diversity as we rightly should, but it's just a nice happenstance. And it's lovely to meet you all. And we'll be chatting for about half an hour, and we'll leave about 3 or 4 minutes at the end for questions. So save them up as you go along. So we have time and tide, which wait for no one. I think that's been said for about 2,000 years. But we've been discussing agile working for a slightly shorter period of time. But in companies, agility and trying to break down siloed working, I can't really think I've ever come across many companies that said, yeah, we don't really want to do that. But I am still, after thinking about it for a while and talking at events like this with companies, sort of confused about what people mean by agility and what, therefore, it would require to reach it. So who should I pick on first? Shelby, why don't you tell us what you make of the term agility and what you would understand it to pursue?
Yeah, so good to be here. Thank you, Anne. Thanks for having us. And the first thing I would say is I think we can all recognize, having come through the pandemic, that the world around us just doesn't stop changing. We'd like for it to change and be consistent for a while, but it never does. So I think for me, agility is the way that you respond to the world and the what's happening to you, your company, your people in the most responsive fashion. So that's what I think about when I think about agility.
You pin it onto responsiveness. Or
responsiveness, the mindset that you need to respond to the world around you.
Yes, Linda, COO for Lenovo, huge company. I guess my association with big companies is still like agility is harder.
I think agility and change is always hard, but I want to key off of what Shelby said. It's really about how a company responds to those exogenous events, right, that are outside of your control. And I think for companies large and small, you can be the most internally agile company with all the right agile processes and agile transformation, but the way that you respond to those things outside of your control, geopolitical, socioeconomic, right? Those things, I think, are what really define how agile a company can be. That's really the stress test scenario.
Right. So that's the stress test scenario, and I want to come back to that in just a moment, but we should just hear from Shelby, from the digital and technology officer point of view. Agility means what?
You meant Corey?
Oh, I do mean Corey. I'm so sorry.
Right.
As you say in the UK, must go to
From a
Specsavers.
chief people officer
My
point of
ability
view.
to mix the panelists 1 and 3 makes me the broadcaster I am today. I do apologize.
All good.
Corey, do go ahead.
Right.
Yeah, no, I think agility really comes down to how dynamic you are in response to change. I think sometimes we think about agility from a technical sense because there's a whole agile way of working and agile methodologies, which does, we often see in technology companies. In our case at Genentech, we're a biotech company, and we're part of a big pharma company with Roche. And so it really is about how do we think about both our internal structures and also our partnerships and all the pieces that need to go together to respond to what's happening in a much more dynamic way.
So was I right then to make that link with breaking silos? Or are we talking then, please let anyone just continue for a minute and then others might want to come in. Or was I just making a kind of bridge that's not actually so automatic? I mean, one can imagine breaking silos without necessarily enhancing agility in and of itself.
Personally, I find it hard to imagine being agile without having cross-functional teams work together. So I think you're absolutely on point. You have to break those silos to truly be agile.
And I think that that's a good point that you made earlier, too, about agility having a technical and a technology element, but then really complemented and coupled with the business agility, with your partnerships. I think there's a micro level of agility, maybe even within teams, maybe even within silos. There are probably some that are more rigid than others. We probably all know of functions that are maybe more agile in their ways of working than other functions. But then at the macro level, I think agility and this pandemic and this event has caused some businesses to fundamentally have to change their overall business model, which then, to Corey's point, that has to happen cross-functionally. You can't change the entire business model of a company without having that agile nature across all of the functions.
I think you're going to get 3 out of 3 on you do have to break silos if you want to be a more agile organization.
I'm going to spend the next 20 minutes finding something they don't really agree on. A word that I know sometimes elicits different responses of where it fits here is transformation.
Yeah.
And transformation in companies, again, it seems like such a always companies are transforming, societies are transforming, but just unpack that a bit if you could from each of your perspectives. Where does transformation, and are you transforming to become more agile? Are you being more agile in order to transform? Or am I just someone who studied a bit too much philosophy at university?
It's a really meta question.
It is a meta
go for
question.
I know Corey has a view on this.
Well, I do, because I kind of wish we could erase the term transformation from our vocabulary.
Oh,
I don't know about your
amen.
organizations, but in ours it's becoming, not so nice a word. And I think it's because when we talk about often organization transformation, what ends up happening is we're talking about organizational structures, we're talking about job changes, which of course are challenging in any scenario. And so if I think about what's some of the basis of agility, it's about that ability to experiment and constantly improve and make iterations. And so in some cases, yes, you can transform to become agile, but I think often how we think of transformations are these big events that then change things, and then we live with that for a while, and then we have another big event, and then we live with that for a while. And so rather than a series of big transformations, in my opinion, I think agility should really be about how do we embed continuous improvement and flexibility in our organizations, which is a different way of working entirely.
And your problem with the transformation word or ideas, it sort of sounds like it's a kind of a cascade. You get a bit of it, and then you get a bit more of it, and then you get a bit, and I suppose it doesn't feel holistic. Do others agree with that, or would anyone like to speak up for the T word?
I sort of, when I think about transformation, the image of going from being a caterpillar to a butterfly comes to mind, right? That's true transformation, primarily because you can't go back to being a caterpillar after you transform
Turns
yourself.
out.
But I do think this element and this notion of being agile and going through these iterative processes to having a vision and a clarity for where you want to get to, but getting there in iterations of making these changes, seeing how they work, how they're landing with your employees, do they really believe in it? I work in technology, and probably Linda will relate to this. It's a heck of a lot easier to change computer software than it is changing human software. So I think really agility allows us to make those changes, see how they're landing, learn from it, and then keep moving towards becoming that butterfly. So that's how I think about agility as contributing to the transformation.
Mind you, I've seen some software that would challenge that description. Not
still-
obviously from any of you.
We probably
But
still
that's
have a few more
nice-
years where human programming is still more advanced than computer programming until it catches up to us.
right.
I think that to your question, Anne, sometimes agility is really pitted as the antithesis of the status quo, which is not necessarily true, but it does elicit a lot of those, I think, organizational antibodies against change. And so one of the things that we do at Lenovo is that we make sure that when we have large transformation agendas that we're trying to help our customers and partners implement, we actually test them internally. Right, we're very proud of dog fooding things internally,
fooding.
getting the
Lovely
kinks
phrase.
out,
Yeah.
right? Whether it's in our supply chain or our tech stack, and then once we have eaten our own cooking, then we're able to take it out to our customers and help them as well.
Yeah, that's agility in action. There you go.
That is agility in action, although I would share with you a moment as a Brit, the first time that phrase was used on a business call at our place at The Economist, and of course with great seriousness, for a senior American person in the business said, and it's time we ate our own dog food, and there was a long silence in the room, sort of 10 very perplexed people sort of wondering about Rover's dinner. That's maybe why we need change management, which I'm going to come on to talk about next. Where does agility and clarity around the terms, and at least we've tried to pull out some of your broader thoughts there, where does that fit in change management? And of course, change management now iterating so fast that perhaps once I might have sat here saying, what's your change management strategy for 3 years? Probably out of the pandemic, everything is moving faster. So is agility helping you there, or is it an extra level of, sort of pressure or stress sometimes?
I'll share some initial thoughts, and I want to hear what they think as well. So the first thing I would say is, if you think of the journey that you're going on as having the clarity of vision for where you need to get there, there's a change management element to bring people, processes, and everything along on the journey to get there. So I sort of think of the change management as this long arc of getting you to your vision that sort of happens over time. And I think the agile ways of working, and not necessarily agile methodology, but agile ways of working, allows you to have these smaller cycles that I think allows you to do your change management much better. It gives intelligence to your change management process in a much more frequent way to say, here's what I learned. For example, we're going to roll out our massive new headquarters next year. We've set up a shop in our existing headquarters where we are going to literally deploy everything we're going to build in our new headquarters in a small space and have our employees come in and show us how they feel about it, tell us if everything works, in fact, test out which food menu they like. So we're going to do an agile experiment of our new headquarters and our existing headquarters, learn from it, and then we use that to manage change when we get our employees there. So that's how I think about the two interplaying together. They're not one or the other. And clarity is essential no matter what you're doing. I think that's part of the leadership responsibility of any organization, is to provide clarity for where we're going. But not with, and I think there's a saying that future institutes talk about. You want to have clarity of vision for where you're headed, but the problem is when you have too much certainty of how to get there, that's when you get locked into your ways of working. And agility lets you move through that process with having clarity, but without too much certainty, so that you can adapt and move along.
I love that. I love that focus on clarity, right? And kind of communicating that change and where we're headed. I think that communication and really over communication is key. And what we've found at Lenovo is that part of over communication is also training to make sure that people understand how to implement the new processes, use the new systems, embrace the new mindset. And that's an important part of change management, not just defining, where we're going, figuring out how we get there, but then also making sure that it's actually adopted as part of the new agile ways of working. And when we help our customers and partners change their business models, like for example, with the coming of the pandemic, helping mom and pop restaurants, get onto delivery platforms, right, become digital and app enabled. That training piece is something that's really critical that we have found to make this last mile work in adopting the agile ways of working.
The last mile is an interesting idea there, isn't it? Because I think it's, in a way, it sort of seems to me to come from a previous way about thinking about change, because there's always going to be the next mile afterwards. But you remind me that when I've been in businesses that kind of didn't think that way, that you've got to have somewhere that you want to get to by a certain time, and that maybe there's less tension with agility than my bias might have been.
Yeah, I think this concept of inclusion is really important, because in any model where you're trying to change, you have to balance what's top down versus what's bottom up. And I think in Agile, it's especially important, because top down, you need to have a common vision and a why. But really, ideally, the people closest to the work are the ones doing the how and coming up with the solutions. And so they need to have the context in order to do that. And because things are moving so quickly, there has to be a much easier way of getting information to inform that decision making. And the email cascades and all the ways that we typically try to communicate change, the big town halls, it doesn't work in an agile environment. You really have to be much more timely, much more inclusive, having real-time conversations, and thinking about how you do that in a scalable way is challenging, but we also can leverage new technologies for that, and make sure that we're spreading messages cross-functionally that are similar, and not just, to your point before, staying in our silos with the information.
Corey, I think your point is so important, that we're only as agile as our last mover.
Yeah.
Right? And so having that flow down and that over communication, and having the right, I think, subject matter experts, be it on the technology side or the business side, to not only help, be the expert and design that transformation, but then helping it get to that every last mover, I think is so important for these organizations.
I love that. I really do love that. And I think it was most apparent to us that we can be an agile organization. We're a large, we're an incredibly large pharmaceutical company that's global. We realized when the pandemic hit that we could be incredibly agile if we wanted to be very, very quickly. And we set some very clear vision for we want to care for our people first, make sure everyone's okay, patient safety first. We said that business continuity is next, and we're going to really support our people through the transformation. So that's all we said from the top down. And we really trusted each country to make the right decision at the right time on when they keep their offices open, when they call on their customers, who comes in, who doesn't, how they make supplier decisions, all of that. And we trusted our ecosystem to do the right thing. And back to your point, people show up in amazing ways when you trust them and you give them the right context and you give them the guardrails. They rise to the occasion. And now, once the pandemic bit was done, we kept asking ourselves, how can we repeat that? Like, why are we not exactly?
Why weren't we doing that before?
I'm not going to give you another one just so you can get to the next level.
This is true, I'm sure, for everyone. I just happened to share it. But that was agility in action, and we couldn't believe it because so I just want to probably add to this question around change and the point around change to say, I think we should avoid externalizing agility as something that someone else is going to do to you, and just believe that you have it in you to learn how to do it in the moment and rise to the occasion. You just need clarity of context and where you're going, and stop working in silos and reach across the boundaries and get things done. So
I think that's so right. This pandemic stress test, I think, was a really good proof point for all of our organizations, right? GSK, Lenovo, Genentech, even The Economist. The fact that our organizations were able to kind of embrace that agility and make it happen.
I love the even.
Yes.
My God, like
even
the media.
Even. No. I didn't mean it that way. Of course,
She might be invited back.
I mean, because all of us, I'm sure, have manufacturing facilities in China, right, which has a zero COVID policy. Yeah. And one of the things that was really an aha moment for us at Lenovo was how we were able to quickly respond and get that supply chain and logistics in action, despite having that manufacturing footprint there and having to deal with all these changes. So. I think it was a really good proof point.
Corey, you wanted to come in, but you remind me that we haven't discussed agility in the context of globalization or challenges, which I might come to, but I think you just had a word.
Yeah, I mean, I was just going to add, so you definitely have the person component and being willing to test those assumptions and jump in and work across, silos. Additionally, you have to have the leadership who's willing to let go, to let those things happen, and to let people do their thing. And then you need to help reduce the barriers, and particularly as we think about our organizations, large, global, incredibly complex, the systems and the processes around people also need to flex, because otherwise you have all these people willing to be agile, willing to jump in, and then they just face boundary after boundary after boundary. Yeah. And so how do you sort of attack all of those elements, the employee mindset, the leadership, and then also the systems and processes around people? Yeah,
and it's also, I do think teams become perhaps a bit stressed if they're told that we need everyone on the bus, only to find out that the kind of bus is only really going one way anyway. It's got a limited number of stops. Someone's probably been through that speech. Yeah. I think that. But it's a tension, isn't it, between having those sort of things to say and to believe in, but that allowing people to say, well, actually, I don't feel I'm on the bus. Help me here. Yeah. Linda reminded me of something I definitely wanted to put to the panel, which was, it's easy. It's not easy from the perspective of the very demanding jobs you do, but perhaps there's a sort of optimism bias around the idea of agility and silo breaking. It's like, I know even when we write about it, it sort of comes with this sort of, this is good, right? Tag, and then people look at maybe what doesn't work so well or where it fits in a deglobalizing world or even a slow growthy, what do we call it? Slowbalization.
I haven't heard that before, but I like it.
Yet.
I'm going to use that one.
Just deglobalizing, it's just a general sense of a sort of gumming up of the international trade system. I was at WTO last week, and that was definitely a topic. So I'm sure you will all say to an extent that agility is part of the answer, but do you accept that it brings particular challenges? Who'd like to start?
Yeah, I think when it comes to business model transformation and the way that people have thought about globalization or localization with all of these kind of macroeconomic events, agility, I think, can be practically adopted at the right level for every organization. When the pandemic hit, for example, we saw some of our customers kind of narrow their focus into really coring up and narrowing down into what they do best, right, in order to face those macroeconomic headwinds. And then the things that they found to be non-core, they wanted to find a trusted partner to take that load, take that burden off of their business model. Then we found other customers who did the polar opposite. They took the pandemic as an opportunity to invest more broadly, to expand into more markets, right, to take that opportunity to get even more global or even expand and broaden their portfolio. And I think both of these types of ends of the spectrum do require the right expertise on the business side and the right technology partners to kind of help you implement, again, agility at your own pace, agility that's practical for what suits your situation. That's what I found. But Shobi, Corey, open to what you all have seen as well.
Yeah, I think, I mean, if your question is, can agility be a bad thing in some circumstances? It's not the right thing. Probably, but most probably not. Like, I wouldn't go around trying to disrupt my manufacturing facility with, let's just go disrupt that and try new things. I would never do that, because that's a very streamlined process. But will an agile mindset help us think through, oh my God, can I use the data that's available in this very streamlined manufacturing operation to make better decisions and predict a batch failure so that I don't have to hold a medicine back from a patient? Yes. So I think an agile mindset is always helpful, but an agile process is applicable to some specific scenarios where I think it makes sense, and other times you probably want to use whatever's right for the circumstance. So I would never walk away from having an agile mindset, but I think we should be careful about abusing that to do something that you shouldn't be
It may
doing,
have different iterations, probably better than applications,
Yeah.
depending on, that's an interesting
That's
point
right.
about the supply chains. And just, as someone once said, if you want to know how an alarm clock works, don't just smash it up with a hammer and then have a look. Apply your agility idea more carefully.
Yeah.
Corey, what do you think?
I think that often we use the term agility when we really mean speed. And I don't think they're synonymous, because there's a stability component of agility.
Right,
And
I really like that.
it's just as important that we're conscious about what we need to keep stable as what we need to flex. And so, I like to say it's definitely not a one-size-fits-all, but it's a fit for purpose. And I think sometimes, at least, I don't know about in your organizations, but in ours, we were on this agility bandwagon, and so groups that weren't doing something in service of agility were almost being villainized, like, why aren't you being more agile, or you need to do more of this? It's like, look, it's not a one-size-fits-all. Right. And we really do need to be judicious about where we apply it and where we need to be sure that we have that stability. You need that stable backbone in order to be able to flex things around it.
And I love that verb that you used, flex, right? Making sure that the processes kind of flex around what you're trying to do. And I think as a technology company, it's the same for technology, systems and processes around the tech. How to make sure technology is flexing up and flexing down, and maybe even flexing and pausing as needed as you implement your transformation journey or your agility journey. And that's something that we've been able to provide and test at Lenovo as well.
It sounds like a lot of people on the panel do Pilates. We have the strong core
Yes.
and the flexibility.
The Pilates of technology, helping
Yes.
to implement agility. I love that.
There you go. That's going to be our next conference subject.
It is,
All right.
yes.
We're
We'll
going to
do
have
it.
an entire session next time we meet. It's going to be with lots and lots of Pilates jokes.
That sounds
Book
great.
your space now. Things don't always go right in businesses, and that is the norm. And what about agility and the concepts we've discussed? And please, panel, interpret it as you will. I don't want to fixate too much on the word. I take that point that maybe sometimes we use agility when we really mean transformation or ability just to respond more quickly. So interpret it as you will. But where does it fit when things go wrong? If there are any examples that come to mind, or any times when things have just been bad, either they've just been bad in business terms or there's been a challenge in culture terms, where does it fit then? And who would like to start on this? People love the negative question.
Well, I'm happy to start. I might turn it into positive, we'll see. But I wanted to build on something that Shobi said, because times of crisis can be really clarifying. They're obviously, we don't ask for them, we don't want them, we don't hope for them. But at the same time, and I think about the pandemic and what we were doing as a company to discover and develop drugs in response to COVID, it was amazing to see what people did when they came together for obviously a burning platform. And I think what's unfortunate is that often it takes that type of burning platform, hopefully not another pandemic, but to get people in motion to think about how do we all work together to get something done? And to your point, we were looking at that going, why haven't we done this before? Or does it really take this to get us moving? Yeah. And so
that's a really good point, actually. It's not so much that you want the next crisis, but it does make you realize where the triggers could come earlier on in the thinking.
And how do we get proactive about that in a way that we still have a burning platform, but it's around sustainability of the business. We have to do this in order to continuously improve. Sometimes that's not as compelling to people because they don't see the short-term need or the immediate downside if we don't do it. And so I think, I think we need to work more on building it into our way of working and our way of being so that it doesn't take a crisis for us to have to learn how to improve.
Let's get quick answers on that if I could. I'll just leave a bit of time on the clock for questions because we've ranged very far and wide, and it may be that there is some curiosity or some experience out there. So just quick thoughts, if I could, if anyone would like to come in off the back.
I think the only thing I'll add to the question around what happens in a crisis is I think it's probably the most natural time for every human being to naturally become agile because they're all reacting to this common thing that's happened. And I think the pandemic was just common globally for all of us. But I do think that it's the time when there's naturally that proclivity to being more agile because you want to find a way out of the difficult situation you're in. So I think it shows up more naturally in individuals in that moment. And you should know how to capitalize it and channel it.
Yeah, I think one of the very well-known taglines of agile working is to move fast and break things, right? And organizations, they tend to like the move fast part and not the break things part. And so I think one of the things that's really important then is to have someone who has done this before, has maybe, again, dog-fooded internally, whether it be in rolling out the new headquarters or deploying devices or whatever, creating new drug use cases and drug technology. I think that's really important, right? I think organizations need to have that confidence that as a trusted partner or as a trusted advisor, that this has been done before, that we have a partner who can not only move fast, but make sure that things do not break. And so that, I think, really helps to overcome some of this crisis of agility.
Great point in which to end there. Who would like to ask a question? Yes, good. I'm sorry, I was staring into the light. Hi. Oh, sorry, it's on Slido. I'm so sorry, I forgot the whole technology bit. I have completely ruined the whole process.
We can do
Could I just take one on Slido, sir, and then I'll come over to you.
So to follow what Linda was saying, someone says, how critical is trust when it comes to agility? So what would you ladies say about that?
I think that trust is incredibly important, right? Trust as well as over-communication, these all go hand in hand. Without that trust, then I think that it makes it even harder to overcome the status quo. It makes it even harder to embrace that transformation. And the way that I have found kind of organizations that maybe don't know each other or haven't worked together before to build that trust, one of the things that's really important is to have those proof points, right? Is to be able to show this type of working will generate results. And these results are quantifiable, and we've proven them before, again, ideally by eating your own cooking.
Yeah, and I also think that leaders trust in their people and the capabilities of their people to help solve issues is critical in Agile because it can't be the leaders making all the decisions from on high. They have to trust that the people closest to the work know how to solve the issues.
Oh, that's great. Should we take David's question and then we'll wrap it up?
So in 2019, every company had a vision and had their written down objectives and had their social responsibility activities, and they were all sitting there thinking they were doing the right thing except for the climate. And then the pandemic hit. And lo and behold, Pfizer experienced a unique thing. Their natural business model became the most important thing to the world. However, 99% of the companies weren't in that situation.
question, please.
Yeah, we may
So-
need just to switch to the question just to finish the
So
session.
in the world of climate change, no company has its natural business model fit for purpose. So what do you do when you've got a global threat to the entire population and no company has its natural business model fit to what is needed? What is the company's responsibility?
Well, that's quite a big one on which to end.
18 seconds.
Yeah, here you go. Climate change, companies, and possibly the end of the kind of world as we know it. But I think there's a sense behind it of there are bigger challenges out there yet than
And what do we do
the
about it,
day-to-day.
right?
Last thought from each of you, any order you like.
I'll simply say that it is a question that deserves more time. But the core point here is that it ties to this thing of innovation. And I think if we believe in, and it's emerging into ESG goals in almost every company now. And I think if we think about innovation as a way out of the problem that we are facing, and I think agility lends itself to thinking about how to solve it. So that's probably how I would answer the fact that we have to innovate our way out of the fact that we are stuck in these business models.
I totally agree. I totally agree. There's so much innovation and investment now being placed in sustainability and services to help companies become more sustainable, from their technology stacks to like their board level goals and things like that. I know that at our company, at Lenovo, we are investing incredibly in not only our internal ESG goals as it relates to climate, but also in providing sustainability offerings so that we can help others to make sure their technology refreshes are done in a very sustainable manner, or helping them understand what is the power utilization in their data centers.
Yeah, I would just say, obviously, this pandemic has been a huge wake-up call for every industry and every person about how we live, how we work, and everything that we do as a company to make sure that we're looking after our people and that we're looking after our planet. And so it's definitely, I mean, we have these conversations all the time now about what can we be doing to be more sustainable, what can we do to make sure that we're looking after the health of our people. And so I'm really proud of our efforts, but there's no question that this is going to be something that's part of our everyday dialogue from now on out. Yeah.
I thought it was a very nice idea as well, actually, to sort of step outside ourselves a bit. And I'm grateful for the question on that point, that as much as we get into what's next for our companies, what's next for our sector, that broad context is in the end, it's what we want to be remembered for. Thank you very much to my amazing panel. I thought they were fantastic.
Thank you, Anne.
Yes. Thank you, Anne.
Thank you.